let's go back to Hey Amud Bet. We'll continue from there. It's a drop of Chazara, but let's go. I want to try to get to the next Amud today. So let's go from where it says, Ella it's like 5-6 lines up from the bottom. So I would have thought to learn Aseh is doche, a lo ta'aseh that has karetz from kibud avayim. How? Titania. Yachol yehe kibud avayim doche Shabbat. I would have thought, perhaps, that kibud avayim would override Shabbat. Talmud lomar, ish imo va'aviv tirau, ved shabbatotai tishmoru, ani Hashem. The Torah says, honor your parents, keep Shabbat, ani Hashem. Kulechem chayavin bichvodi. You and your parents both have to honor me. So you have to honor your parents and keep Shabbat, ani Hashem. That means if your parents teach you or tell you to do something for them that's a mitzvah, but you're going to have to violate Shabbat to do it, you don't do it. So the Gemara says, you could see from here that we're talking about doing an isur karet on Shabbat and a chiyuv of kibud avayim. And we need to learn that the violating Shabbat does not override kibud avayim. That means that generally the rule would be an aseh would override karet. So the Gemara, let's read it inside. My love the amar le shachot li basheli isn't the case we're talking about that the father says for the son, I need you to cook for me, make me this, shecht for me. V'ta'ama de katav rachamana et shabbatotai tishmoru. And the whole reason that we learn that a child is not allowed to do this for their father on Shabbat is because the pasuk says et shabbatotai tishmoru. We have this special drasha. Halav hachi, but let's say we would not have had a drasha. What would I have thought? I would have thought that the chiyuv of kibud av va'em would override even in isur karet of Shabbat. Because I need a special drasha to teach me, ani Hashem, don't violate Shabbat to do kibud av va'em. But that means that if I would not have had that drasha, I would have thought that an aseh overrides a lo ta'aseh that has karet. So this would be a source, the fact that this drasha is necessary would be a source that aseh is doche lo ta'aseh karet. So the Gemara says, no, that's not the case. We're not talking about that the father is asking the child to do an isur karet on Shabbat. Lav de mechamer. Lav de mechamer is it's an isur on Shabbat that's a not karet. A lav de mechamer is doing some malacha in tandem with the animal, leading the animal with a load, let's say, having the animal carry a load. That would be an isur of mechamer. So it's not karet. That specific isur is not karet. So the Gemara is saying you don't have a proof from here that aseh overrides a lo ta'aseh of karet, because we're talking about the father told the child to do something that would be kibud avayim, that would be mechamer. That's not an isur karet. So we're saying that a person does not, the chiyuv of kibud avayim, the aseh of kibud avayim, does not override this aspect of Shabbat, which is not even karet. So I would have there's not even a discussion. Of course, there's no havamina. There's no even intent of thinking that the chiyuv of kibud avayim would override karet. That's not even part of the discussion here. We're talking about not karet. And even though it's not karet, it doesn't override. The chiyuv of kibud avayim does not override the isur of Shabbat, of mechamer on Shabbat. So the Gemara says, if that's the case, you're switching up the case on me. So if that's true, Ella, dekaimalan da'ati aseh, v'dachi lo ta'aseh, that which we know, we learn, we paskin, that a regular aseh overrides a regular lo ta'aseh, ligmor mehacha de lo lidchi. Why don't we learn from here that it doesn't override it? That a regular aseh does not override a lo ta'aseh. Meaning, why don't we say, okay, doesn't aseh override a lo ta'aseh? Well, we have a pasuk by Shabbat that teaches me that if a person's parent asks them to do something, and in order to accomplish the kibud avayim, they have to violate a non-karet aspect of Shabbat, what's the halacha? Don't do it. So why don't we learn from there? An aseh, regular aseh, does not override a regular lo ta'aseh. Even, what's it called? Even if it's not karet. Meaning, why don't we learn from here? Aseh does not override lo ta'aseh. Just like aseh of kibud avayim does not override the isur of mechamer on Shabbat. So says the Gemara, v'chitem ashani lave de Shabbat de chamirei. Maybe you'll tell me, no. Even though it's not karet, but Shabbat is more strict, more severe. You can't learn from Shabbat to other isurim. The Gemara says that's not true. Vatana ba'al makai v'lo kaparech. We have examples of this elsewhere. The Braita learns from Shabbat to other isurim, and we don't make this distinction. We don't ask this question. We don't say, oh, no, you can't learn from Shabbat. It's too strict. We don't say that. Detanya, Yachol amar lo aviv hitameh, o she'amar lo al tachzir. The Braita teaches like this. Let's say you have a father who is a Kohen. Means his son is a Kohen. And he tells his son, go over there, get me that thing, or bring me this, and he has to become Tameh. Go get that thing from the Kever. So, does he have to listen to his father or not? Or, if he sees a lost object, the child has a chiyuv to return the lost object. Let's say the father says, no, don't do it. So, Yachol, I perhaps would have thought that Amar lo aviv hitameh. If the father tells a child who's a Kohen, hitameh, become tameh. O she'amar lo al tachzir. Or if the father says to the child, al tachzir, don't return this lost object, leave it. Meaning the father tells the child to do something that's asur for him. Yachol yishmalo, I might think, listen, maybe he has a chiyuv of kibud avayim to listen to his father. Talmud lomar, ish imo v'aviv tirau v'et shabbatotai tishmoru kulechem chayavin bichvodi. We learn from the fact that kibud avayim does not override Shabbat. It also does not override other isurim. It doesn't override the isur of him becoming, the Kohen becoming tameh, or the isur of ignoring a lost object.
How does the Tana learn that?
How
does he
apply it from Shabbat?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So we're using this Tana to prove that there's no, you can't, the Tana doesn't ask over here, the Tana doesn't say, oh, no, Shabbat is different. You can't learn from the fact that that doesn't override Shabbat, that it also doesn't override other things. We obviously are not making that distinction. And we're saying the same way that if a parent tells their son not to do some type of Isur, it doesn't override Shabbat, it doesn't override any Isur. Meaning we're viewing Shabbat as equal to other Isurim as far as this drasha is concerned. So we should also then say that any aseh does not violate any lo ta'aseh, because kibud avayim doesn't violate Shabbat, even a non-karet action on Shabbat. So learn from there. Any aseh does not override any lo ta'aseh. You want to tell me Shabbat is different? We obviously don't say Shabbat is different because we learn from here that kibud avayim doesn't override any other mitzvah. So why don't we take it all the way and say you learn from this pasuk that tells us that if a parent, it says Ani Hashem kulchem chayavim bichvodi, you're all chayav in my honor. Why do we learn from there? Not only does kibud avayim not override any isur, but any aseh does not override any lo ta'aseh. Learn from here, flip the whole rule 180 backwards. Aseh is not doche lo ta'aseh. Why don't we learn that from here? So the Gemara says, okay, let's see. Ella mishum deikar lemifrach ma lehanach sheken hechsher mitzvah. So the Gemara says, you know what you can do? You can get out of it by saying those cases, meaning that, so the truth is a big machloket. Rashi and Tosfot how to learn this line. So I'm actually going to explain like Tosfot. I think it's just more pashut pshat in the term hechsher mitzvah. So when a person is doing kibud avayim, let's say a father tells a child, I want you to cook for me on Shabbat. So the actual cooking and preparing the food, with that, he's doing the actual mitzvah. But let's say a father says, I want you to bring me something. And the child has to carry the animal, has to do mechamer. That itself is not the mitzvah. That's just a hechsher mitzvah, meaning the mechamer that he's doing, the isur that he's doing, is not the actual mitzvah of kibud avayim. He's not accomplishing kibud avayim by doing that. He's just doing that in order to be able to bring it to his father and service his father. The kibud avayim is the actual service that he's doing to his father, not the journey that he's taking with the animal. That part is not kibud avayim. So it doesn't override the isur of Shabbat when it's only a hechsher mitzvah. Right? Does that make sense? Meaning, the Gemara says you can't prove from here that any aseh violates any lo taseh. I'm sorry, that an aseh is not dochel lo taseh. Because over here, the aseh is not even really being accomplished. The aseh is just a hechsher mitzvah. It's a means by which to get to the accomplishing of kibud avayim. But it itself is not actually accomplishing kibud avayim. So just to clarify, cases that the father told the child, I want you to bring me, I want you to bring me these items from, the farm or whatever, from the other side of town. So the actual bringing these items to the father is the kibud avayim. The child, in order to accomplish that, he has to do mechamer. He has to go take the animal and carry it with the load. So he's going to be doing an isur. We cannot say, we see from here that the aseh of Shabbat does not violate, the aseh of kibud avayim does not violate, Boker Tov, does not violate the isur of Shabbat. Therefore, any aseh should not violate any lo ta'aseh. Because over here, the aseh is not even being accomplished at the time that he's doing the isur. It's a hechsher mitzvah. It's not an actual mitzvah itself. That's the way Tosfot learns, which I think is more simple malach over here. So that's out the window. So basically, after all said and done, at this point, what do we try to do? We try to use kibud avayim to learn aseh is dochel lo ta'aseh aseh is dochel lo ta'aseh of karet, because we have a special limud that kibud avayim is not doche Shabbat, which is karet. And the Gemara said, no, you can't learn from there. It's not talking about doing karet on Shabbat. It's talking about isur of mechamer. Okay, so Ella, where it says Ella, first word on the line is sheken. So we're going to go a little bit faster because the Gemara is just going to repeat a very, very similar shakla v'ataria to what we just said. Ella salka da'ata chamina tete mi binyan beit hamikdash. The Gemara says, you know what? I would have thought to learn from binyan beit hamikdash, from the mitzvah, the aseh of building beit hamikdash. The Tanya, yachol yeh binyan beit hamikdash doche Shabbat. I would have thought to say that maybe you have a chiyuv aseh, build the beit hamikdash. Lo ta'aseh, don't do melacha on Shabbat. So I would have thought that maybe when those two are fighting each other, when you have a clash between them, and you have a chiyuv to build the Beit HaMikdash, but a lo ta'aseh to build on Shabbat, I would have thought you do it even on Shabbat. You do the aseh overrides the lo ta'aseh. Talmud lomar, et shabbatotai tishmoru umiktashit tirau. The pasuk says, et shabbatotai tishmoru umiktashit tirau. Kulechem chayavin bechvodi. You and the mikdash both are chayavin in my kavod, in Shabbat. So you see from this limud that building the Beit HaMikdash, the aseh of building the Beit HaMikdash, we have a special limud to teach me that it does not override the Isur Karet of Shabbat. So my love beboneh v'soter, aren't we talking about that the guy is going to be doing milachot on Shabbat that are karet? He's going to be building and putting bricks and breaking things down, boneh and soter. So v'ta'amad dekadav rachamana et shabbatotai tishmoru, and the whole reason we know that building the Beit HaMikdash does not override Shabbat is because of this drasha that no, you are both chayav in my honor. So, right, kulchem chayavim bechvodi. You and the Beit HaMikdash have to honor Shabbat, and you cannot build the Beit HaMikdash on Shabbat. Halav hachi, but if not for this drasha, meaning elsewhere where we do not have such a drasha, dachi, a regular aseh would override a lo ta'aseh even when there is karet. It's just over here we have a drasha to teach me that no, you don't build the Beit HaMikdash on Shabbat. Otherwise, anytime you have an aseh that clashes with a lo ta'aseh of karet, the aseh would override. So the Gemara says, lo, no. We're not talking about that the guy is doing an isur that is karet on Shabbat. That, there's no question. Lav de mechamer. What are we talking about? Again, the isur of mechamer on Shabbat, which is not karet. What is mechamer? Mechamer is doing a melacha with the animal, leading the animal with a load. So we're not talking about that there's no hava amina, there's no question, there's no thought to say that a person would not be able, of course, a person would not be allowed to.
Mechamer doesn't mean midirabana.
It's not derabbanan, it's deoraita, but it's not karet.
Why is it not correct?
We learn from the psukim of Ata B'Emtecha. What's the? I don't remember the exact limud, but we learned from the psukim that it's a lav. It's really machlok in the Gemara. We're going with a tzad that it's a lav. So we're talking about we're not suggesting that I would have thought that a person would be allowed to do boneh on Shabbat for building the Beit HaMikdash. That was never a suggestion. That was never a thought. Of course, aseh of building the Beit HaMikdash is not doche lo ta'aseh of karet, of doing a malach of boneh. But maybe I would have thought that an aseh would be doche a lo ta'aseh that is not karet, like mechamer on Shabbat. Meaning I would have thought that we could tell the person, listen, go lead your animal and bring bricks and stones and whatever to build the Beit HaMikdash on Shabbat, so have the animal carry the load.
They never build a big mishkan on Shabbat.
The Gemara is telling us it's not doche Shabbat. Let's continue. So the Gemara says that I would have had a hava amina that it is doche Shabbat. It's doche, that the chiyuv of building Beit HaMikdash would be doche the lav of mechamer, that a person could do mechamer to bring materials for building the Beit HaMikdash. Va'afilu achi lo dachi. And even so, even that, it's not doche. Meaning that's the chiyuv. That's what the Gemara, that's what the psukim are teaching us. So the Gemara says, okay, so why don't we learn aseh doche lo ta'aseh from here, that it's not doche? Meaning, why don't we learn from here the same way that mechamer, you have a chiyuv of building Beit HaMikdash, aseh. You have a lav of mechamer on Shabbat, lo ta'aseh. What wins? The lo ta'aseh wins. You're not allowed to do it on Shabbat. So the Gemara says, why don't we learn from here? Any aseh is not doche lo ta'aseh. The Gemara says, lav de Shabbat techamiri. You'll tell me, Shabbat is different. You can't learn from Shabbat to other places, to other isurim. Not true. V'hatana ba'al makai v'lo kaparich. That we have a tana that elsewhere does learn from Shabbat to other places, and we don't ask this. We don't say, you cannot learn from Shabbat to other places. We don't say that. The Tanya, same brighter that we had earlier. Yachol amar lo aviv hitamao sha'amar lo al tachzir. Yachol yishamalo. I would have thought that if a father tells a child who's a kohen, go become tameh. Go get me that thing from the Beit HaKavarot and become tameh. Or a father tells a child who has a chiyuv to return a lost object, says, listen, don't return it. Don't bother yourself with that. Just keep it or just ignore it. So I would have thought that you listen. Talmud lomar ish imo v'aviv tirau and eb shabdotai tishmoru. So we learn from Shabbat, just like Kibud Avayim does not doche Shabbat, it also does not doche other Isurim. So we do learn from Shabbat to other Isurim. Kulachem chayavin bechvodi. We learn from that pasuk that you're all chayav in my honor, the same way that you and your parents are chayav in Shabbat. You and your parents are chayav in returning a lost object, in not becoming tameh for the Kohanim. So we learn from that pasuk. It not only applies to Shabbat, but any isur, a person, the chiyuv of Kibbutz Avayim is not doche the isur. So why don't we learn from here also that binyan Beit HaMikdash aseh does not violate a regular lav of mechamer on Shabbat. So learn from here, aseh is not doche lo ta'aseh. So the Gemara says, "Ela mishum dika lemifrach malhanach sheken hechsher mitzvah." The Gemara says no. The case of mechamer to build the Beit HaMikdash is not a mitzvah; it's a hechsher mitzvah. Meaning, when you have aseh, this is again shita Tosfot. When you have aseh against the lo ta'aseh, so usually the discussion is because in order to fulfill the aseh, you actually have to do the lo ta'aseh, and the lo ta'aseh is going to be how you're fulfilling the aseh. Over here, the aseh, it could be fulfilled without the lo ta'aseh. What's the lo ta'aseh? It's mechamer. What's mechamer? You're making the donkey, the animal, whatever, carry the load of stones and materials for building the Beit HaMikdash. That itself is not a mitzvah. When a person is violating mechamer, he's not doing a mitzvah, because he's not doing binyan Beit HaMikdash. It's a hechsher mitzvah. He's just preparing the materials to put himself in the situation where he will be able to do the mitzvah. But the violating of the aseh is not actually accomplishing the mitzvah. That's the way Tosfot learns it. So again, Rashi learns differently. I think Tosfot is more pashut pshat in the lashon of hechsher mitzvah. Yeah.
There'd be a nafkamina if he's actually like taking a hammer and putting in a screw in the Beis HaMikdash.
Yeah, but that would be karet, so that we don't even have a hava amina. We're all dealing with hava aminas over here. Lamaaseh, everything is asur.
Right.
We have drop. But the question is, what was the hava amina? Was the hava amina that you would even allow to be boneh, and we would have a source that maybe aseh would be doche lo ta'aseh of karet? The Gemara said, no hava amina about boneh. The hava amina is mechamer. And the Gemara says that even that hava amina of mechamer, it's not really, we can't learn from there that aseh is not doche regular lo ta'aseh, because that's only a hechsher mitzvah. So the Gemara says, well, 1 second. We just had this shakla v'tarya. We just had the discussion. We learned hechsher mitzvah already. The Gemara says, hechsher mitzvah tepuk limiatam. Why don't we learn hechsher mitzvah from the previous case, from kibud avayim?
We don't need both.
So the Gemara says, we don't need both to teach me hechsher mitzvah. So the Gemara says, it's true. We could say that. But, in achanami, vet shabtai tishmo mikdashei tirau lamali. So then why do I need the pasuk by et shabtotai tishmoru mikdashi tirau by binyan Beit HaMikdash? So the question of the Gemara is like this, and I want to flip the page and go a little bit into the next amud. So the question of the Gemara is like this, very quickly. We had kibud avayim is not doche Shabbat. We learned from there that hechsher mitzvah aseh is not doche a lo ta'aseh when you're just doing a hechsher mitzvah. So we have also binyan Beit HaMikdash is not doche Shabbat. We're learning the same thing from there. An aseh of building the Beit HaMikdash is not which is only a hechsher mitzvah, is not doche lo ta'aseh, right? If you're only doing mechamer, it's a hechsher mitzvah. It's not doche lo ta'aseh. So the Gemara says, okay, we don't need two limudim to teach me the same thing. One of the limudim we could use to teach me that aseh is not doche lo ta'aseh, even when it's not a hechsher mitzvah. So the Gemara says, no. I need this pasuk of binyan Beit HaMikdash not being doche Shabbat to teach me something else. So mibayle lekedetanya, we need it for the following teaching. Yachol yitiare adam mimikdash. It's very interesting. I have a havamina that a person should fear and service the actual Beit HaMikdash. Talmud lomar et shabtotai tishmoru ve'et mikdashi tirau. The pasuk compares Shmirat Shabbat, it connects Shmirat Shabbat to reverence and service of the Beit HaMikdash. Ne'emra Shmira b'Shabbat, v'ne'emra Mora b'Mikdash. We have Shmirat Shabbat and fear Mora of the Mikdash. Ma Shmira ha'amura b'Shabbat. Lo mishabat ata mityare, ela mimi shehizhir ala Shabbat. Just like when it comes to Shmirat Shabbat, it's not the actual Shabbat, it's the one who commanded Shabbat that we fear, meaning HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So, Af Morah ha'amura b'mikdash, lo mimikdash ata mityare, ela mimi shehizhir ala mikdash. Same thing with Morah Mikdash, we don't actually have to service and have reverence for the actual Beit HaMikdash, it's for the entity that created the Beit HaMikdash, meaning for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What? It sounds like there's some type of havamina that a person, there's a havamina that a person would actually fear and service the Beit HaMikdash itself. The Gemara is saying no, it's all fear of, it's all Morav HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the Gemara says, Ve'ezoi Morav Mikdash. What is examples of Morav Mikdash? Lo yachnis adam barabayit b'maklo. Person cannot enter Harabayit with his walking stick. B'man'alo, with his shoes. B'pundato, with his it's like some type of like a fanny pack wallet. Ba'avak shal gaber aglav, with the dirt on his feet. Lo ya'asenu kapandaria, he's not allowed to make it a shortcut. He can't cut through Harabayit. Urkika mikal v'chomer, mikal v'chomer, he's not allowed to spit there. Ve'en li ela bizman shebeit hamikdash kayam. So I only see this is true when the Beit HaMikdash is around. Bizman she'en Beit HaMikdash kayam minayin. How do I know even when there's no Beit HaMikdash, a person cannot do these actions on Harabayit? Talmud lomar, et shabbatotai tishmoru mikdashi tirau. We learn from this pasuk, et shabbatotai tishmoru mikdashi tirau. What do we learn? Ma shmira ha'amura b'shabbat le'olam, af mora ha'amura b'mikdash le'olam. The same way that Shmirat Shabbat is le'olam, is forever, meaning there's no time frame. It's for throughout history. There is such a machloket elsewhere in Shas. I don't think we're getting involved in that here. So the Gemara is ending off that the same way that Shabbat is eternal, so too the area of the Beit HaMikdash is eternal. There is discussion. Once you mentioned it, there is a discussion of going on to Harabayit Bisman Hazeh. That's the Rambam. That machloka gets involved. Lamasa, consensus of the poskim of most major poskim is that it's a problem to go without Efer Paraduma.
It's behind the kotel, isn't it?
Behind the kotel, yeah. There's a discussion of putting your hands in the rocks of the kotel. Is that considered going?
What about the tunnel that you go behind it?
I don't know how far that goes. I'm not so familiar. But okay, let's just what's the recap of today's Amud? We did a lot of back and forth as far as what do we come out with. So just a couple bullet points. Number one, we tried to prove from Kibud Avaim that Kibud Avaim is Doche Shabbat, Aseh Doche Lo Ta'asev Karet. The Gemara rejected that. We got a little bit involved in Lav of Mechamer, and maybe we learned from there Aseh is not Doche Lo. The Gemara suggested a second suggestion. Why don't we learn from Beit HaMikdash that Binyan Beit HaMikdash is not Doche is not Doche Shabbat. So why don't we learn from there? Aseh would in general be Doche Lo Ta'aseh even when there's Karet. The Gemara also rejected that. And the Gemara on the way we learned a couple of things about fearing Beit HaMikdash, which these things are halakha l'maaseh about a Beit HaKnesset as well. That a person cannot make it a shortcut and do certain activities in the Beit Knesset. Maybe one day we'll get more into that. Okay, Chazakim.
It talks about everything.